On this episode, This Week in Space, we're talking back to space school. Join us.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is This Week in Space, episode number 125, recorded on August 23rd, 2024. Back to Space School 2024. Hello and welcome to another episode of This Week in Space, the Back to School edition. I'm Rod Pyle, editor-in-chief of Ad Astra magazine. When did you ever go yay when you were going back to school?
You know what? You have a point. You have a point there. But
college, yes. High school, no. And as you may have noticed, I'm here with my good pal, Tarek Malik, editor-in-chief at space.com, and apparently a man of rare attraction to women of certain merit.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I do, because we got fan mail after our episode last week with Zarina. We got fan mail to the effect of, that Tarek, he's so cute, and I just want to eat him up and all that stuff. So beware, you might be at.
Thank you. Thank you.
More importantly,
I got fan mail from our last episode too with Zarina from my mom, who said, like, that the show was great, and also we got to send our kids to my daughter and my nephew to space camp after that space camp discussion.
Yeah,
so
I think that's a good idea. So start saving your shekels now, because it's $2,000.
Well, I got some news real fast. I am 100% COVID free as of today, so that's really exciting news. I can go outside again and get the vitamin D from the sunlight. It's gonna be exciting.
Time to celebrate.
I love it. That's
my laser pistol for those on audio only. Okay. And speaking of audio only, before we begin, don't forget to do us a solid. Make sure to like, subscribe, and all the other podcast things you could do to make us popular. And join Club Twit, because for only $7 a month, you'll get all kinds of cool extra stuff, including, he raises his eyebrow, a peek into the inner workings of this show. And there are some people that might actually find that appealing. But more importantly, today we're going back to school. Yes, space school. We're going to get all set up for a new school year in 2024. So we're not sitting in the back of the class, which I spent enough time there already. I don't need to go back in my old age. Hold on one second here. There we go. And now, drum roll, please. Thank you. An overdue space joke from listener Martin Harris. Hey, Martin. Tarek.
Yes, Rod.
What comes around every 76 years and tells jokes?
I don't know. What?
Halley's Comic. Okay. We got the, what do they call those things? Boozlas? That horn thing?
Oh, that's an air horn.
That's an air horn. Okay,
I know you're talking about the real long ones. Those like
Zuzuba or something. Yeah. Okay.
We should get some of those. That'd be fun.
Oh boy, no, thank you. So I've heard that some folks start eyeing the rat poison when it's joke time on this show, but you can help. You can help those folks by sending us your best or worst space joke. You don't have to identify which it is. We'll know it on site. To us at twis@twit.tv. That's TWIS at twit.tv. By the way, Tarek.
Yes.
After I got that nice set of emails about our show last week, I donated. Did you?
You know what? I've been meaning to, so I will totally do that. So okay. I will make sure to do that.
3 figures.
And you should all do it.
At least 3 figures, because it's a good cause, and she got a lot of good feedback from that.
Oh, that's great.
Really. All right, so let's do. What do you say we do some headlines?
Yes, headlines.
Because I think we're kind of all headlines all the time this week.
Yeah, well, this is like our back to school. This is when, like my daughter's going back to school next month, so we have to get ready for all the things we're going to learn, and we're going to get ready for all of the space things that we're going to learn or see or get ready for over the next season. So that's what the theme I think that we're shooting for this one is. So that's why we're going to structure it this way.
Okay, well, I'm glad you reminded me, because the show was your idea, and I think it's a good idea. I like your ideas. So speaking of good ideas, we have Polaris Dawn.
That's right.
Getting ready for liftoff, which is pretty exciting. Beside anything that's going on with the two supposed commercial suppliers for the space station, which would be SpaceX and Boeing, commercial suppliers for crew anyway. We have SpaceX just demonstrating great prowess in not just fast turnarounds and reuse of machinery and so forth, but of really, what's the word I'm looking for? Innovating in spaceflight in ways that have never been done before. I mean, we've got self-landing rockets that are reusable and so forth, but this kind of this fast pace of being able to adapt to new ideas and changes and private orders in this case for private operators really kind of reminds me of the early space race where they were doing things fast and furious.
It's exciting. It's exciting, and for reasons more than one. And just to kind of give people a reminder of what Polaris Dawn is, because as of now, we're less than a week away from launch. This is a mission financed by U.S. billionaire Jared Isacman. I forget what he made all his money in, but he made a lot of it.
Oh, it was credit card processing.
Is that what it was? Well, yeah, I tell you,
shift for something.
That's right. That thing that takes the little percentage out and gives it to the credit card company when you buy like your latte or something like that.
And he dropped out of high school to do it. I mean, he did finish, but he dropped out of actually going to high school to start this credit card processing company. A lot of people thought he was crazy, as people will in those situations, but apparently he did very well. And the thing about him that I find so fascinating, I remember when I first read about him, I thought he's one of those overachiever, types of guys that look at you like dermatologist looks at a wart or something, but he is the nicest guy. Yeah. He's humble. He's kind. He's space Jesus. I mean, it's the most amazing thing. And we had him at a conference a couple of years ago, and the kids are coming up and mobbing him. And it was like watching, an idealized video of the Pied Piper. He's practically hugging them and going, "Oh, my children." I mean, he's just this really great guy who's doing this from the bottom of his heart for all the right reasons. Okay, I'm sorry, continue.
It's all right. It's all right. And just a little more background on Jared Isaacman. So yes, billionaire. Also, he likes to fly jets. He has his own stunt jet company that flies these really cool jets.
Excuse me, but I believe it's the largest private air force in the world.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I forgot the name of it. That's why I didn't mention it too much. But you will have seen him flying over like the spaceport and whatnot over the last week with his crew. But he bought the first private flight on a SpaceX Dragon Inspiration 4, and then he just gave 3 other seats away to the public for that mission, and raised $250 million for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital for cancer, which is his cause. And so for this mission, which he bought 3 other missions after that one with SpaceX, this is the first Polaris Dawn, and then there'll be a Polaris, I guess. I don't know if they're going to keep the sun motif. And then the third flight will be the first crewed flight of Starship. So he bought in bulk from SpaceX for these missions. Yeah. And this Polaris Dawn is supposed to be the first private spacewalk. That's what he really wants to do. And they've raised millions again for St. Jude. They've teamed up with Doritos, and they're going to have space Doritos on this flight. So a lot of firsts. But right now, the status is that it was delayed. It was supposed to launch on Monday, the 26th, shortly after we're recording this. It's delayed 24 hours while they do final rocket checks. And there's a lot of modifications on this Dragon spacecraft. It's the same one Isacman and his previous crew flew on, but now it has, instead of a window, a hatch with some railings so that they can kind of stick their head out and look around and marvel at the Earth from these new spacesuits that I'm sure Isacman helped finance the testing of. They look like SpaceX launch suits, but they're designed for partial pressure so that they can, or for vacuum so that they can stick their heads outside and whatnot.
So we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but because we're in the headline section, I see we have the Doritos can up, crumb-free Doritos. Imagine that. Let's run along here to these headlines. You're right. The juice is loose.
The juice is loose. That's right.
This one's all yours, brother.
Yeah. It's been a while since we launched it, but Europe's Jupiter Icy Moons Explorer, which is on its way to Jupiter to look at those icy moons. Europa Callisto, and the like, Ganymede, the biggest moon in the solar system. It actually came back. You don't want that stuff to happen. We launched it last year in April of 2023, and it's taking the long road to Jupiter. And to do that, it just flew by Earth the week that we're recording this, and it took amazing photos of the Earth from space, of the moon, and there's this really interesting image of the Earth and moon like together in the same picture. You don't see that all that often. And it's just like a nice reminder that this mission is out there, that it's healthy, and that it's doing good things. And it's one of many gravity assists that it's going to take. I mean, it's going to actually come back to Earth in 2026 and 2029 to just keep looping and getting faster and faster, so that it can get to Jupiter in 2031. But this flyby this year in 2024 is going to send it to Venus, and then it'll like slingshot. Is that what I said? Slingshot around Venus, and then come back to Earth, and then do that again, and then it goes to Jupiter. So, and this is an exciting mission because we've learned so much about Jupiter. The fact that it has these icy moons that have thick layers of either like dirt or whatever, and then these oceans underneath it. And this mission is specifically designed to look at those icy moons. What are the signs for life? What can we do to sample them from above, and then hopefully, with some other missions that are coming down the pipeline, go down and land on these worlds and explore it, just like Robert Heinlein said we should with Farmer in the Sky, Rod. So
okay, well, and it's worth pointing out they do have fairly thick icy surface over what we think are warm liquid oceans below, ranging anywhere from a couple of miles to a couple dozen miles and more. So bringing a drill isn't enough. You have to bring. They've talked about little nuclear fueled melters and all kinds of other things. But for now, at least, we're talking about something like Europa Express. You're looking at just perhaps sampling the plumes that are.
You mean Clipper, right? Europa Clipper.
Europa Clipper. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh my God, Europa Express. You're looking at sampling some of these watery plumes that come shooting up from the surface of Europa and with other missions Enceladus out by Saturn, and looking for organics in there. So rather than directly going down, which we'd love to do someday, of course, and swimming around those oceans with a drone submarine and looking for the whales of Europa and all that, for now it'll be this kind of indirect, intuitive methodology, which is still pretty darn exciting.
We also have to be careful because, as we learned in 2010, all these worlds are ours except. Right? So,
the other stat I loved, I was reading the other day, I think it was about Europa, that they think, even though it's of fairly moderate size compared to Earth, that there's more water in that under below the ice ocean than in all the oceans of Earth.
That's right.
Which is a mind-bending stat because Earth's oceans are already pretty deep. So this is a big moon with a big ocean we're thinking about, and therefore probably a pretty small core.
Yeah. I had one last point though about Juice, just about the flyby itself, because if you missed it, dear space fans, and you can actually get your telescopes out for the next ones to come in 2026 and 2029. We got some video from some skywatchers, Gianluca Massi and others, who saw the spacecraft as it zoomed by because they knew where to look. So just keep that in mind over the next few years, because you might be able to see Juice one last time.
Well, and as our pal Jerry used to remind us, don't forget to cite your sources, and these are all from space.com.
That's
you
right.
could track such things 24/7. All right, next up, the Fram II mission. So this is kind of interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
The first, another private SpaceX flight, and the first polar orbit flight with human beings ever. So lots of satellites go in polar orbits, meaning when you launch, instead of going around the equator of the Earth in orbit, which is a much easier thing to do, you launch and then do this dog leg either north or south as you're ascending, and you go into a polar orbit over the north and south poles. Now, military satellites do this because from that one orbit, they could see every part of the Earth over time because the Earth is turning underneath them. And because they're going vertically, as they continue to go in circles, they are continuously seeing different parts of the Earth below them. So for spy satellites, it's very good. For human missions, I'm not sure anybody saw the point back in the past, but this mission, well, I'll just read it. This is being funded by billionaire Chun Wang of Malta, and he's a crypto billionaire, so I guess there's still a few of those after all. It says Wang aims to use the mission to highlight the crew's explorational spirit, bring a sense of wonder and curiosity to the larger public, and highlight how technology can help push the boundaries of exploration of Earth and through the mission's research. Now, I had to stop and look up the word explorational because I didn't think it was a word. Turns out it is an accepted form.
Huh.
So props to their PR department. What it does not mention is that apparently another part of this mission is to directly observe and study aurora-like emissions called STEVE. Strong Thermal Emission Velocity Enhancement. There were no details in the article on how, but I guess these look like little surging kind of aurora emissions.
Yeah.
Things you see at the poles.
Yeah, STEVE is a really interesting phenomenon because it looks like an aurora, but it's like a ribbon more than that ripple kind of curtain that
It's
you
the
would
Nexus.
think. And it's it looks like the Nexus ribbon from Star Trek. What is that?
Generations.
7 Generations. Yeah. So, this is an interesting mission because it might launch as early as this year, is what SpaceX said. And by the way, the statements that you were reading come from SpaceX's mission overview, and it was kind of a surprise announcement. Whereas we were all been getting ready, like we were just talking about with Polaris Dawn, all of a sudden they drop another private mission out of the blue, and that explorational spirit is really, I think, key to this Fram II mission. It's named after the 19th century Fram ship that went to the poles to go explore them, and then also Wang has selected a bunch of kind of exploration pioneer type people in their own right. The vehicle commander is not Wang in this in this scenario, which is different. In the past, it's always been either the owner of the flight, like Isacman, or like a professional astronaut that has flying with Axiom Space. Instead, it's going to be Norway's, I hope I pronounced this correctly, Jannica Mikkelsen, and who will be the vehicle commander. And I think Mikkelsen is an explorer. And then you have Australia's Eric Phillips as the vehicle pilot, Germany's Rabia Roji as mission specialist. And they are, one of them is a photographer, an adventure photographer. One of them is a filmmaker to make these adventure films and whatnot. So they are bringing different, it's a different type of crew than what we've seen on other private flights of like either thrill seekers or whatnot. These are people who are going to chronicle this experience in perhaps a different point of view than we've seen before.
And this is a big step towards the long discussed artists and poets kind of flight. I mean,
I think so.
Talking about that
so.
since the 1940s, but they got serious about it during the shuttle era. But
do you think they'd launch this polar flight out of Vandenberg? They've never done that before.
I don't know, and I don't know if Vandenberg's actually equipped for that kind of flight.
Not for crude flight, but they've launched polar flights out of there before. I guess they could do it out of Florida, but
I think so. As long as they're not going over, the thing about polar flights out of Vandenberg is you're not going inland over parts of California that don't really want to be bombed if something goes wrong. Yeah, and you could certainly do that from the Cape. I think
that means if they do a polar launch from Florida, that we could watch them. I could wave from New Jersey, as they pass overhead, because we'll see them go up all the way up the East Coast. If they do that at night, people will be able to see it. That'll be exciting.
You have the strangest priorities, my friend, but I love it. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with the really good stuff, so stand by. This episode of This Week in Space is brought to you by BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables? Maybe you never skip a leg day or a therapy day. When your schedule is packed with kids' activities, big work projects, and more, it's really easy to let your priorities slip. Well, don't do that. Even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. I know a lot of people that have gone through psychotherapy. I've benefited from psychotherapy. And it's funny because to a lot of people, especially guys my age, I guess, there's a sort of sense of, I can take care of it. I got this. Well, the truth of the matter is, it's just a conversation, and it can be a very rewarding conversation. And it can be a conversation that can really change your life and make things a lot easier. So from my own personal experience, I would encourage you to consider psychotherapy. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, you might give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and to be suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/twist today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/twists. All right, my good friend, let's talk about your favorite subject in mind, Starliner.
Yay, Starliner!
So, hey, we have another presser coming up tomorrow, and we're going to hear, we're told, what the plan's going to be. What's the latest on Starliner?
Rare Saturday press conference from NASA coming up.
That one's weird.
And it's serious. When last we spoke, which was our last episode, we had heard from NASA where they were saying that they are going to have two big meetings and they're going to study what they think that they want to do with these astronauts and with the Starliner, and they'll make a decision by the end of August. Now, 1 week later, one episode later, we are at a position where this week NASA announced they are going to have a press conference. It is going to be on a Saturday, so that they're kind of serious because they're going to make us all work on Saturday. And NASA Chief Bill Nelson himself is going to be in this press conference. It was slated for 1 o'clock in the afternoon, but I've heard that they may be hedging it to say it's whenever these meetings are over, because they're having two big meetings this week, and one of them, I believe, is called a pardon me, I was just looking it over. It is called a test flight readiness. Yeah, no. It's an internal agency test flight readiness review, and then there was like a mission management team review that they were going to do this week, and after that agency readiness review, that's when they're supposed to have this big call, and it's going to be some sort of decision because they have the head of NASA there, and I would doubt that Bill Nelson would be there for like another, hey, we're going to wait another week to decide type of moment. So it does seem like they have finished all of their testing. They've finished all of their studies. They just have to debate now. Do they bring Starliner home with the crew? Do they leave the crew on board and bring Starliner home empty? If they leave the crew, do they come back on Crew 8's Dragon as like extra passengers? If they don't do that, do they come back on Crew 9 in February as regular passengers? And then what do they wear when they come back? Because their Boeing suits are not compatible with the Dragon suit, or with the Dragon capsule. So a lot riding on this where, it's really hard to know what they're going to say. But they really have, it's been almost 80 days. I think it's going to be 80 days as of the meeting of this press conference that they'll have been up there.
So 10 times the expected mission duration.
10 times, exactly. Yeah.
So one of the things, Eric Berger put out an article in the last couple of days about this over at Ars Technica, and one of the things that was raised there is, as we've discussed privately, you and I, is this whole suit compatibility question. The SpaceX suits are very different from the Boeing suits on a lot of levels. I mean, besides looking very different, apparently their functionality is different, at least in terms of how they hook into onboard systems and so forth. And one scratches their head a bit about, okay, we went through the whole Apollo 13. We got square filters in one spacecraft and round filters in another. How could you let this happen again, NASA? Because really these things should be universally compatible for just this reason. And the explanation, at least so far, has been, well, we wanted to minimize constraints on the private suppliers, presumably to keep things simpler in this new space age. But, that was kind of a basic, you'd think. Now, for EVA suits, going on the lunar surface, whatever, I could see where you'd really want something specialized, although back in the Apollo days, those were somewhat interchangeable, at least in terms of fittings for oxygen and so forth. But when it comes to these pressure suits, which are really just designed to keep an astronaut alive if there's an emergency depressurization of the spacecraft for some reason, these are not EVA suits. you'd assume some commonality, but I think right down from how they fit in the couches to how they hook into the onboard systems of the spacecraft and a dozen other things, possibly even including electrical interfaces, I don't know, they are not at all compatible. And that's kind of a problem, as we're seeing.
Yeah, well, I think that there are fundamental design philosophies that are different between SpaceX and Boeing in general. Starliner, if I recall, has like a lot of switches and extra, it feels very space shuttle-y when I was in the mock-up before they were starting to fly, whereas Dragon is really, it's touchscreen. It's got that more kind of sci-fi type of a thing. And you bring up a really good point. NASA didn't provide the flight suits for their commercial crew astronauts. If they did, then there would be a commonality across these two because they would be wearing these.
They wouldn't even have to provide them. This would just be a matter of specifications on the contract, right?
I guess so. But then that would, the argument there is that it corners in the contractors as to like what they could do in terms of like adjusting the costs for their own thing, right?
Or using legacy designs.
Exactly. Would we have gotten the sleek kind of Starman-like spacesuits from SpaceX if NASA had given them this is the box that it has to go in and whatnot? I don't know. But the issue that you and I were talking about was this compatibility issue for bringing Starliner astronauts down on Dragon because they wouldn't be able to wear their Boeing Starliner suits because they're not compatible with the plugins, but they don't have any SpaceX suits because those are tailor-made for SpaceX, Dragon astronauts.
Right.
And so as I understand it, and I don't think I'm wrong, but I always could be, right? I'm not perfect. But I recall.
Well, somebody's mother thinks you are. But go ahead.
I recall NASA in the last press conference saying that they would come back in like a shirt sleeve environment. They would have to wear just regular flight suits on the way, which I don't think NASA's done since the Challenger accident, right? And that was the last time they had those flight suits with the little helmets. And then they brought up the orange Aces suits as one of the the reactions to that. So that'll be interesting to see if that's the decision that comes out. So just
by way of further explanation, the up through Challenger suits we're talking about were basically lightweight cotton jumpsuits with a helmet that had some kind of an air gasket around the neck, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the helmet pressurized.
If you've seen the Space Camp movie, that's what they were wearing. They were wearing those helmets and that get oxygen.
Did you say the Space Camp movie?
Yeah, yeah.
You go wash your mouth out with soap, young man. That wasn't even a movie, much less entertainment. That was an atrocity. Anyway, yeah. Wow. So it's those lightweight suits, which would protect you from a loss of breathing air, but not from full depressurization at very high altitudes. So my understanding, and I'm not sure if we read the same thing, my understanding was that had been returned without a pressure suit, shirt sleeve environment, quote unquote, had been discussed, but not preferred.
Yeah, not preferred, but yeah. I again, we got to find out what they're going to say. I think it's very possible I misunderstood what they were saying. So
yeah. Well, then if that's the case,
someone let me know. Someone who's listening, if you listened to the press conference last week, write a letter and tell me how. No,
write him a letter. What's your space.com email address?
tmalik@space.com.
Okay. Yeah. So I decided, I haven't looked at the Boeing website for a while. So when I read all these reports and listened to the last press conference, I thought I'm going to jump over there, and it still says Boeing's confidence remains high in Starliner's return with crew. Then another bit elsewhere, NASA was still not clear on the plan ahead, which kind of, says something, not the opposite, but a little less profound. And as you mentioned, plan to conduct at least 2 reviews, Program Control Board and Agency Flight Readiness Review by the end of August. Mm-hmm. So, maybe all of this will mandate a compatible, crisscross usable crew suit. We'd like to think so. But at any rate, we've got to be ready for rescue operations at some point, and this will be a test if it happens.
NASA's statement about this announcement that they're going to make says, and I quote, NASA and Boeing have gathered the data both in space and on the ground regarding the Starliner spacecraft propulsion and helium systems to better understand the ongoing technical challenges. So I'm going to cut in, there's a reminder. It was helium leaks and thruster problems. Those are the big concerns that after undock from the space station that they're worried about for reentry. And then I quote again, the review. So this is the review that they're going to talk about ahead of the press conference, this technical review. The review will include a mission status update, a review of that technical data, and closeout actions, as well as certify flight rationale to proceed with undocking and return from the space station. Now, that certify the flight rationale and proceed with undocking sounds like they have a scenario that they could get comfortable with Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams coming back on their Starliner spacecraft. Calypso, I think they named it, actually. So it does seem like, I could be reading too much into those tea leaves. I don't know, but I could see that as being a result of this press conference tomorrow.
Well, let's hope so, because like you said, neither of us wanted to work on Saturday, and here we are. All right. Starship. We have a Starship flight coming up, and this one is going to be a batter and a catcher.
That's right. So one of the big things coming up for the fall that we'll be watching is the many Starship tests that we expect SpaceX to do, because they have to achieve all these milestones if they're going to build a Starship moonlander for NASA by 2026? That is not very far away, right?
No.
So
with a lot of tests to do before it could be used as well.
And they've only flown 4 so far, and they've made incremental steps with each one. Now, Elon Musk and SpaceX have been teasing Flight 5, and one of the really tantalizing things about this test that's coming up just as school starts is a demonstration of the landing on land and being captured by the Mechazilla chopsticks. Mechzilla? Mechazilla is the robot Godzilla. Anyway.
No, but Mechazilla, because I was corrected on this a number of times by people. I kept calling it Mechzilla, but no, it is in fact, according to my chief writer on Ad Astra, John Cross, Mechazilla. Or Mechazilla, depending on how you read it.
It's SpaceX's nickname for their launch platform / gantry / these 2 arms that they call chopsticks that close in, and they use it to pick up and stack the vehicles and whatnot. And SpaceX and Elon say that they're considering trying to catch the super heavy booster when it comes back and lands after the end of this test flight, and that may be pretty awesome to see. And I was always like, no, they're not going to build it because they only have 1 launch pad. They only have 1 Mechzilla chopstick thing. They're building a second one, but it's in Florida. Well, lo and behold, this week, SpaceX announced that they have completed the core structure of their second launch pad for Starship at their Starbase facility. So now they have a spare that is almost complete. So if they blow this one up with a super heavy trying to get caught by it, we've got a picture of it for the folks on the YouTube stream. That's the tower all by itself. In the back, you can see there's another tower that has a little it looks like an L sticking off of it. Those are the arms that go up and down like an elevator to grab Starship, stack it on top of the booster, or put the booster on top of the launch stand itself. So it does seem like they're getting a lot closer to this test flight. I'm still not convinced it's going to happen by the end of August, but definitely the first half of September, I think we'll see something, because it's been a while. They have kind of a more flexible and open-ended launch permit for these flights from the FAA now. Basically, if they have a failure and they know what the failure is right away, then they can launch again. Like if it's not like a danger to the public failure, but something on the vehicle that they can easily explain.
Well, I hope they do soon, because as you pointed out, they really need to pick up the cadence if they're going to make anything close to that 2026 date for the Artemis program. And, let's just do a quick rundown. They've still got to make orbit.
Yes.
They've still got to have a successful return from orbit. They still have to have a vertical touchdown from orbit. They still have to test
of both vehicles, right?
Well, although not for the lunar program. That's a one-way trip. They have to still test orbital refueling. They have to ascertain how effective it's going to be, so they know how many tanker flights it's going to take to refuel the lunar vehicle. They need to test the cryogenic support units that keep that fuel super chilled during transit to the moon and while it's loitering there. They have to test landing on the moon. They have to test deploying the landing legs and whether or not effective on the moon. They have to test the elevator system from the top of the craft down to the lunar surface.
That's 140 feet.
Yeah, and then they have, well, so far, they're talking about larger versions of Starship as well, though probably not for HLS. And then they have to test departing from the moon and rendezvousing either with Gateway or more likely with Orion. So I believe that's 10 or 11 steps of major things they have to do. And they got under ideal circumstances, 18 months?
Yeah. Yeah. And don't remember,
we're going to be a little late.
Don't forget that they also, depending on what were the estimates for how many refueling flights? Something between 9 and 15.
It started at 6, and now it's up to perhaps as many as 20, which is crazy.
So that means that for Artemis 3, they would need 21 to 22 Starship / super heavy. I guess super heavies for the most part, because you would potentially be able to reuse Starship over and over again. Ready to go off the board. So they have to build all of that. Plus, each super heavy needs 33 engines. So they have to build all those engines.
But we're going to talk about those engines later. But they're putting those out at the rate of, I guess, one every couple of days now.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's no longer Starship with super heavy. It's ship and booster.
Oh, well, Starship is the general system, but yeah, they call ship.
Right. So Starship is the stack. The top is now called. You want to talk about? I mean, this wasn't even using AI to come up with naming. This is like, what can we choose as boring and generic? How about capital S ship and capital B booster? All right, we need to take another break. Stand by. We'll be right back. All right, let's talk a little bit about one of our favorite topics: orbital debris,
space junk.
Yeah,
space junk.
So this has become an increasing problem. Air Force, now Space Force, has been tracking this stuff historically, although others do now as well. But there's hundreds of thousands of pieces big enough to cause serious damage, and many, many millions of smaller pieces that can still cause serious damage. They tend to classify things over the size of a baseball or softball as being very dangerous. But as I've mentioned before, when you have the front layer of a space shuttle window just about destroyed by a flake of paint, just because of the speeds it's moving, even something the size of a BB, especially if it's made out of something that's fairly dense, could cause incredible damage when you're talking about orbital speeds. So it's a big problem. And then you get up into talking about things of which there are many of this size, like dead satellites and defunct rocket stages hurtling around up there. That's a bigger problem.
I think
so in a perfect future, hold your horses, young man.
That's all right. That's all right.
In a perfect future, we'd like to utilize these things because there's a lot of free metal up there that could be grabbed and smelted down. But that's a whole bunch of steps. I mean, talk about Starship being complicated to get to the moon and back. Repurposing and recycling orbital debris is a much bigger project than that. However, Japan-based Astros Scale has announced their second test flight with JAXA, the Japanese Space Agency, to perform an orbital interdiction or debris mission, which will try to bring down a relic upper stage of an old Japanese H-2 rocket, which is pretty cool.
This is interesting, and I think the reason that you picked this one to put on here is because we've been hearing a lot about space debris just in recent months, and I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about it in the next season to come. And Astros Scale is interesting because I think about 5 years ago they had like a tiny little stand-up booth at a space symposium, and now they have not only rendezvoused with an old H-2 rocket stage. They captured amazing imagery about how they did it and whatnot. And they've got this new contract now, like you were saying, to bring a piece down. So if they're successful with this technology that they've put together, I think it's going to be a sea change in a couple of fronts. Number one, obviously there is the promise of space debris cleanup and being able to safely deorbit this stuff and make sure that it doesn't fall over on like what the SpaceX Dragon trunks that fell in North Carolina and Canada,
hiking path,
or China's rockets that they just drop on towns, which apparently they're not planning to do anything about anytime soon because they still keep doing it.
But to be fair, those aren't orbital things.
They aren't, but they did have that satellite that exploded, right? There was that satellite that exploded just recently.
Well, and so there's entire rocket stages. There's big chunks of fuel. Sometimes these things blow up and there's icy fuel hurtling around there. And a big chunk of frozen fuel is just as bad as a rock.
Yeah, this stuff is moving at 17,500 miles an hour, which NASA would like to tell you is... what did they say? 5 times the speed of a bullet or something like that is, I think, what they would say. So
that's a lot.
But the other theme that I wanted to bring up with this is if they do succeed in doing this, bring like deorbiting something, there are going to be questions about that technology being used properly and for approved deorbit uses, because the minute that you show that you can effectively deorbit something with a controlled burn or whatever, you can send a spacecraft up to grab it and pull it out of orbit, is the minute people start to worry about their own satellites, being grabbed and involuntarily taken out of orbit. And I think that is a question that will come up as this industry grows over time.
Well, and I suspect that's why this was left to a Japanese company, because Japan, while not officially neutral, is probably as close to neutral as you're going to get in spacefaring powers when you're talking about China and Russia and the US and eventually India all giving each other the hairy eyeball over, so you're going to grab rocket stages or my defense satellite and throw it into a lower orbit so it burns up. And just so we're clear, that's what this does. There's been a lot of talk about using tethers to induce drag to bring down large objects in orbit, or using a laser, for instance, to try and nudge it into a lower orbit so that it burns up organically. Astros Scale, as I understand it, is using a more direct method of basically grappling and rerouting. Now, this said, most modern spacecraft from countries that are cooperating in this have to have some system. You're responsible for getting your own spacecraft back. So you have to have an engine that eventually will push it a low enough orbit that it deorbits and hopefully comes down in that big graveyard in the Pacific Ocean where we like to toss these things. And that assumes all those are going to work. Now, it's interesting about Astros Scale. So this particular mission, the one I've been talking about, their second one, is valued at $82 million, which is probably about what it costs to get that H2 rocket up there in the first place. But, we're talking about economy of scale here, and these things are always expensive at startup, and you hope that you get an economy of scale over time. The president of the company said that he felt there was a chance they could break even as early as 2026, which I found fascinating. Part of that, and go into profit after that, and part of that is because they recently got a contract to deorbit some of OneWeb's 568 satellites as they fail. Now, I don't know if OneWeb initially had an end-of-life system or not, whether they plan to use graveyard orbits or deorbits, or just hope that they deorbit organically fast enough, because all these internet orbital assets are in fairly low orbits. But at any rate, this kind of work in this marketplace is estimated to be worth close to $20 billion in the next few years alone. So there's gold in those hills, which is interesting.
And with so many companies, you mentioned OneWeb, but you've got Kuiper, you've got with Amazon, you've got a few others that are trying to build out all of these mega constellations. SpaceX, I think their Starlink satellites have a 5-year lifespan. They're designed to be just like retired quickly. But some of these other ones, like
and they all have ball thrusters, by the way.
Yeah, and but OneWeb's satellites are much larger than Starlink, and Kuiper's also will be. So it'll be interesting, like what they want to do, because if they find that it is more cost effective for the Astros Scales of the world to go up and deorbit their satellites, that is extra fuel they might be able to use to, for servicing and maintaining orbit, and maybe it's 5 or 6 extra years of operation and profits they can make from their satellites. And I think that's the business discussion that's going on right now for this stuff.
Yeah, and you mentioned servicing. I mean, that's part of it that I didn't go into, but that is going to become increasingly important, because we put these things up there in a sort of one shot does it all, and when they run out of gas or power or whatever, they're done. And up until the last few years, there hasn't been much work done on universal fittings, but we'd like to eventually see universal grapple points or docking points on larger satellites. and universal fittings for refueling, for instance, maneuvering fuel, for the thrusters, because there is some value, it is thought, it hasn't really been tested yet, in reconditioning and resupplying these things. All right. I want to move on to RS-25s.
Yeah. Yeah. This was your item.
So this is my pet item. So the RS-25, originally designed by Rocketdyne and built over the years for the space shuttle, was the main power plant for the space shuttle system. It's about a about 500,000 pound thrust rocket engine, as I recall, at least the modern versions. And the idea was, this is back in the late 60s, early 70s, and they were first designing the shuttle. The idea was, we want an engine that's not as big and heavy as the ones on the Saturn V, but smaller, that can be reused fairly easily, although it turned out not to be as easy as we had hoped, that would burn liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen and burn clean, and that could be used over and over again in the shuttle program. So they built a whole bunch of them. They used them. They swapped them between the different orbiters. It was a good engine, never failed in flight. Some of them shut down early, but they never failed or exploded, which is amazing. I remember sitting in an aerospace engineering class at UCLA in the 70s, and they were talking about the turbine speeds on this thing.
Yeah, those turbo
the turbines have to spin up to 60,000 RPM in like a tenth of a second or some insane set of numbers like that. I'm exaggerating a bit, but it's jaw-dropping that these never exploded.
They wouldn't explode. They would rip apart the back of the orbiter if something went wrong.
Well, but when you talk about losing a turbine blade or even getting a piece of debris in there that's too large, like a little chip on the edge of a turbine blade, yes, it would deconstruct very quickly, but with all that liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen flying around, kaboom. So bye-bye shuttle program at the end of the 2010s. And we've got 16 of these RS-25 engines left over from that program, which were to be repurposed into Artemis, when back in the days when Congress thought, we'll use old shuttle hardware for Artemis. It'll make getting back to the moon real cheap. Well, that didn't quite work out, but, fingers crossed, it'll be fine. So we've got enough for 4 more flights of the Artemis. So it'd take us through Artemis 4. And we need more of these RS-25 engines or something very much like them. But at this point, everything's designed around the RS-25. So there have been orders placed with, I guess it's Aerojet now, right? That company has changed hands so many times. It's kind of incredible, all these big aerospace mergers.
I think they're based in California, too, Sacramento.
To design a cheaper, easier to manufacture version of the RS-25, and over the years they've been successful. It's the thrust is a little higher, goes up to 111% of rated thrust, which I always found weird the way they factor that. But so that's how high it can go, which puts it up over 500,000 pounds of thrust. It's easier to manufacture. A lot of the parts are 3D printed and so forth. But they're still going to cost, they say they're aiming for a price of only $70 million per engine instead of the $100 million per engine they had originally ballparked, and the $40 million each in non-adjusted dollars during the shuttle program. So you think the cost of groceries is bad. You hear people complaining about that in the campaign this year. I mean, just look at this. Now, I almost am loath to do this, but I just... you have to mention SpaceX when you talk about this kind of stuff, who is building the Raptor 2 engine at the rate of 1 every couple of days, which is dangerously close in thrust to the RS-25, for $1 million each. That's 1/70th.
They got a new one too, the Raptor 3.
The RS-25, Raptor 3 is coming along. The aim is for the Raptor engines to be somewhere around, and a few years ago, I would have said, pish posh, but don't bet against Elon Musk, to be around $250,000 a piece and turned out the rate of 1 a day, while our friends over at Aerojet are still charging $70 million with an M dollars per engine. So I hate to dump on Legacy Aerospace at this point. They're not having a good year, but come on, you guys. SpaceX isn't magic, okay? They're just determined and very progressive and non-union and a lot of other things that make them fleet of foot and less expensive. But now we're getting into these exponential differences in cost. And these are tax dollars, you know? So it's just, I hate to get all hung up on this, but it's it makes my brain begin to melt when I see these prices. And having grown up during the space race, it was like, oh, okay, that's what it costs to go to the moon. Okay, that's what it costs to build a space shuttle. That's what it costs to return from an accident in flight. But it's been proven that this can work and that there are cheaper and better and more efficient ways to do this. And I simply cannot get my head wrapped around. And here comes another flood of hate mail from the armchair engineers going, you don't understand how hard it is. Well, apparently SpaceX doesn't either, because if they can build a reliable power plant at a brisk pace for $1 million or less, then I think old space needs to catch up. Okay, I'm going to end my sermon here.
All right. Well, the rocket. I think you're right. I think that the fact that there's only like 4 flights worth of these engines in the can. I mean, the clock is ticking because NASA wants to launch one SLS a year at least when it's fully operational for the foreseeable future. And you want to go, and they've made purchases for SLS core stages, I think, up to Artemis 9. So that's more hardware than they have engines for. So we're going to have to watch this development over time, make sure that it goes smoothly, and hopefully stays close to the affordability that they're tagging here, because the more affordable they can do that, the better that they can do that, the less expensive SLS will be. And Northrop Grumman on their end is developing a new next generation booster that is both lighter and more higher performing as well, which is a composite body structure that they're hoping to implement.
You're talking about solid booster.
For the solid boosters too.
Yeah.
And that is some more performance they could squeeze out to get other missions in the can too. So,
okay. Well, much more to say here, but we need to go to a break. So let's do that and we'll be right back. Tarek?
Yes.
I know you have this irrational passion and urge, this incredible motivation, this burning need, like an infection, to talk about the solar eclipses coming up, even though they're annular. So knock it out of the park, brother.
All right. Well, I guess we could do like a 1-2 punch, because this is happening with the start of the school year. So is that me punching you?
I've been aggressed. Yeah, go ahead.
Don't sue me. No, but there's 2 things that are coming up between the sun and the moon that I wanted to highlight just for people to keep in mind. Now, there was, as we mentioned in our last episode, a super blue moon for August, and as I mentioned then, that supermoon was the first of 4. So the rest of the school year, or I guess the first half of the school year, all you moony students will be able to see supermoons for the foreseeable. And the one in September, which I think is the 17th, is going to be a lunar eclipse, a partial lunar eclipse that we'll be able to see in the United States as well as South America, Africa, and Europe. And I mean, it's not like jaw dropping or to write home about, but it is actually something that's happening in like the 10 p.m. time frame on the East Coast. And as we all know, I hope that you do, Rod, eclipses come in pairs. And when there is a lunar eclipse, there is a solar eclipse shortly after. And on October 2nd, there will be an annular Ring of Fire solar eclipse. And unfortunately, so those are things to look out for. Now, if I'm going to be a betting person, I'm going to say put your dollars on being able to see the lunar eclipse, because it's visible from a much like wider range of people. The whole continental United States is in that visibility path. But if you are more adventurous, you could book a trip now to Easter Island out in the Pacific. You've been there, right, Rod?
I have not. It's on a bucket list, but and I've been all over the Central Pacific, but never Easter Island. So I think you and I find a way to have company-sponsored junkets to go out there for some reason. The eclipse would be a good reason.
Easter Island is in the visibility range of this annular solar eclipse, and then parts of South America are, and that will be about it. So I will, we'll have to be content with watching the live streams that are around, or I think that Hawaii is in the partial phase of the eclipse there. But if you really enjoy solar eclipses, I do. We don't have a total one again until 2026, I think, is the next one. So we're going to have to
in Europe, right?
Exactly. It's going to be in Portugal, I think, and Spain. So we're going to have to satisfy ourselves with these kind of non-total events. I think there might be a total lunar eclipse next year. Don't quote me on that. I'll have to double check. But we've got a 1-2 punch coming up with September and October with these eclipses that I would like to just make sure that everyone puts that on their calendar. And when you see the moon get a bite taken out of it as it passes it passes into Earth's shadow, just remember that's going to go on regardless of like your deadline in whatever business meeting that we've got. There's more to the universe than my management meeting
is dreamt in your philosophies, Horatio. So just a note on annular eclipses, because I've seen one, and this whole ring of fire thing sounds very cool and dramatic. It's kind of like super blue moon, maggot infested, whatever title of the next lunar eclipse you have, because those are sensational. An annular eclipse, from the standpoint of the viewer, the unaided viewer, basically is you're looking around you and it's slowly getting a little dimmer, but not particularly noticeable. It depends on the degree of the annular eclipse. But it's not like you look up and you see this ring in the sky. You still have to have eclipse glasses or eclipse binoculars. You need to get them from Celestron, or what's the other thing? Lunt Systems, I think.
American Paper Optics. Yeah, Lunt is good too. Yeah. Lunt is good.
These are reputable vendors. Now, you won't see the hysteria around an annular eclipse that you see around any of the total eclipses, but it is still important to drag out your eclipse glasses and use those. At that point, then, yes, you see a ring of fire in the sky with a black spot in the middle, and it's very dramatic. But without an aid like that, all you're going to see is a darkening of the sun. You still can't look at it. It's still way too bright because the sun is a star. And the other thing you might see is a regular pattern under a tree where the leaves are breaking up the light, the incoming light, or if you've got a colander with holes drilled in it, you can hold that out. You've got all kinds of little suns on the sidewalk and go, oh, look at that, little eclipses. So that is exciting. And you also put in something here that I don't think you included. It's the second of 4 back-to-backs.
Supermoons. Yeah. That means it's going to be a super.
Wait.
That means
I have a question. How many hits? What kind of boost in attendance do you get on the space.com site when you start talking about the super blue?
Those are trade secrets that I don't feel comfortable sharing with everybody else. I will say that
there's a bump, right?
I have, yeah, because people get excited and like you look. So we have, it was the super blue sturgeon moon, right? For August. Now we'll have the super harvest lunar eclipse, like moon eclipse, super harvest moon eclipse for September. I tell you, man, you can package anything but the moon. The moon is the easiest thing that for people to see in the night sky, because it's there. Like, you just got to look up and you can see it. And,
I've heard that.
And we forget that it's pretty exciting because it's not going to be there forever. The moon is drifting away at like what, 2 centimeters a year, something like that. So eventually it's going to be gone. Enjoy it while it lasts, Rod. Enjoy it while it lasts.
Mr. Marketing, go for it, brother. See it while you can. All right. Let's take one more quick break and we'll be right back.
All right, Rod, I had one real quick thing that actually I forgot to add it to our list. So I don't mean to.
Real quick. Because you love it. So which is why we love you.
I was watching the Democratic National Convention last night, which of course is when Kamala Harris accepted the nomination for a presidential candidate for the Democrat Party, and it was very, very fleeting, and it was very, very fast. But I did want to drop this in because it is something that we will all, as space fans, want to be paying attention to. And she said that it was imperative for the United States to be a leader in both space and AI, and not to cede those fields and the technological future to China. She said that specifically, that China is the adversary. And I thought that was interesting because she was making that as part of, she was making an argument as that would be a focus of a Harris Waltz administration to maintain the technological, leadership of the United States in the world. And it's the first time, and I could be wrong, but it seems to me like the first time that space has been mentioned overtly in the ongoing presidential campaign. And so it will be interesting to know how both she and candidate, Donald, former President Trump, bring this, because Donald Trump, during his tenure, accelerated the Artemis program. We all remember Mike Pence saying by any means necessary. And also he founded the Space Force. He has a whole new branch of the military. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris, as vice president, has been chair of the National Space Council, which has been working to try to make sure that the Artemis program goes smoothly and the other science goals that NASA and their partners are trying to get are accomplished. And so I would just want to put that on the docket. Of course, space isn't the only reason anyone should vote for anyone for president. You want to make sure that you pick the candidate that best reflects your views. But it will be interesting to see how space is treated in this administration or in this campaign, to see if we'll be able to continue the momentum that the Artemis program has, because they were able to continue that in the shift from the Trump administration to the Biden administration, or if there would be a sea change or some big new direction that each candidate would want to seek. I think that's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, and we'll find out, because as you recall, the leader of NASA is picked by the president.
Right.
It is a nominated position, and Bill Nelson was nominated by Biden, and we'll have to see who Trump or Harris decide to pick to lead the agency in the future.
I suspect Harris would keep Nelson if he wants the job. As far as a Trump administration, I think I know who has a more than decent chance at the slot, but I'm not free to say. But I do want to point out, as I have before, the transition from Trump to Biden as far as NASA and Artemis and so forth is concerned is the first time in my increasingly long and creaky life that I ever saw an administration change from one party to another without a massive sweep of the hand across the card table of spaceflight. And I think also what Harris said the other night, now I can't speak for specific speeches and specific markets. So obviously, if you're on the campaign stump trail and you're in Huntsville, you're going to have one message. And if you're in, Peoria, you're going to have another. When you're in a space state, an aerospace state, you're going to have some kind of pro-space message. But in terms of speeches given at conventions, other than the 60s and maybe in the 70s, I don't remember a candidate talking about space this directly.
And it wasn't a lot. It was like one line. It was like 1 second.
But it invoked the specter of China, which is the new favorite. And there's a time when I would have said, "Oh, that's just fear mongering to get money." It depends on what side of the tracks you follow when you read this stuff, but there is a competition there. I don't think yet I would personally say it's a particularly dangerous one, although there are aspects that are dangerous. We depend on so much for space assets now in every part of daily life. And we've talked about it on the show before. I wrote about it in excruciating length in my book, Space 2.0. But banking, GPS, agriculture, ships at sea, train schedules,
internet,
even internet now. Private companies like Walmart keeps an eye on the parking lots at Target during Black Friday to see how many cars are bringing shoppers there. I mean, when you really dig down into what's going on in orbit, mostly from robotic satellites, it's pretty stunning. And if you think about some power, like recently was talked about in fear-mongering headlines, which may have been accurate, I don't know, Russia having some kind of nuclear weapon or device up in orbit that could create an EMP pulse, electromagnetic pulse, that would wipe out assets on a big part of one hemisphere of the planet, we'd be in big trouble. because a lot of stuff would just come grinding to a halt. And as we saw during the pandemic, we got through it, but the interruptions to the supply chain were basically people getting sick. When you talk about the technology failing, things you can't just swap out another human being to do, this is really serious stuff. So, sorry, this is a long departure, but this fear mongering about we can't let China outpace us in space, there's some nationalistic pride there, but there's also some practical concerns. And by the way, I just want to finish on, if you think that sounds nationalistic, read the Chinese white papers on space sometime. Even when translated into English, it is, and understandably so, because they're kind of new at it, but it is mind-bendingly nationalistic and patriotic. And because they name their missions and their programs and their spacecraft after mythological characters that are deeply grown into the Chinese culture going back thousands of years, it appears to have, from people who study this, a lot stronger relevance to the population at large than space does here. Americans, as I've cited before, depending on the study you look at, soft. They're soft. The space is kind of cool. Is NASA good? Yeah, 50% say so. Should we remain a leader in space? Yeah, 50-60% say so. Should we get back to the moon before China? Maybe 12 to 17% think that's a good idea. So Americans are pretty flabby on this, whereas in China the number is like 70-80%.
So should we name our spaceships after like George Washington then and Thomas Jefferson? You think that would work? I was thinking
Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse, maybe something a little more relevant to pop culture. I don't know.
Marvin the Martian.
I just don't think I don't think that kind of deeply rooted fervor for the past exists here. There's respect, and we think about it on Independence Day and so forth. But in terms of that real love of these deeply ingrained cultural icons, the closest thing might be Marilyn Monroe. So that's a tough one. But I will stop talking about it now because I've already gone on a rant.
That's all right. Yeah, your engine rant. I did not know that was coming. All right.
Good Lord. Yeah. Do you have what do you want to pick for I think, wrap up here?
I think this, as we're getting ready for a new school year, we do have an opportunity to celebrate space in the fall. And World Space Week is always that first week of October, October 4th to the 10th. And this year's themes are space and climate change, which are things that I think we're going to be keeping an eye on for the foreseeable. Climate change in particular. Big storms just recently came by and took a whole piece of my roof off, which is like a strut that I've been worried about. Now I have to actually fix it, So hopefully like satellites will be able to let me know when the next big storm in New Jersey is gonna wallop our house and what I need to do to prepare for it. But it is something that both students and space fans can get involved in. You can have your own meetups. You can have your own events, or you can have watch events for Space Week in particular. And that you just go to worldspaceweek.org and find out how to support or celebrate. I think that'll be a fun way. And then I guess finally, the one thing we were talking about other countries, I do want people to keep an eye on the Indian space program, Rod, because if everything goes according to plan, the Indian Space Research Organization may launch their first prototype, their first crew capsule by the end of the year. And that wouldn't have any
crew, right?
No, not with the crew, just an uncrewed test flight, the Gangayaan space capsule. And these are vehicles that are designed to carry crews of 3 on the geosynchronous launch satellite vehicle, geosynchronous satellite launch vehicle, and that'll be interesting to see because they are rapidly trying to follow in China's footsteps and show that they can launch people into space, have their own astronauts on the moon. They've already reached Mars on a shoestring budget compared to NASA, like a tenth of what NASA spent on the Maven spacecraft. They were able to get there with their Mars orbiter, and I think that it'll be very interesting because there was a presentation this week in which they have released designs for their own mega rocket heavy lift vehicle that'll be like 300 feet tall or whatnot. And that'll be interesting to see. It is like twice the size of their biggest rocket right now. And it is a good reminder, like you're talking about China, that there are other countries looking to explore space, looking to get involved, and it'll be really interesting to see how this program both evolves on its own and makes partnerships with other countries. So.
Well, I guess at some point we could become a customer, depending on what happens with SpaceX.
And Chandrayaan proved that there was water on the moon. With that first Chandrayaan-1 orbiter. So, I mean, it's not
strongly indicated.
Strongly. It was them.
No, it's not proof until you get down there and dig it up. Come on. Which was what Viper was going to do, but no more Viper.
Oh, no.
I won't get into that, but that was a heartbreaker for me and a lot of people I know, and I'm still not over it. Well, you've done it again. You've spent another hour of your valuable Friday evening or whenever you pick up this episode when you could have been romancing your partner with us, and I count that as a bit. My heart goes pitter patter when I think of that, because as I mentioned before, we actually did get one note from a listener who said our date night is to spend it with Rod and Tarek on This Week in Space. So I take that very personally. I hope to get more of those. Not too much detail though. But thank you for joining us for episode 125, the Back to School edition. Tarek, where can we find you remodeling your basement or replacing your roof strut these days?
Well, you can find me at space.com as always. And this weekend on Saturday, I guess, trying to tune in to NASA's press conference for Boeing. But I'm excited because now that I'm COVID free, I can actually take my daughter to the Anime New York Comic-Con this weekend. I've been building a 5 foot tall scythe for her all week long, and I'm looking forward to getting that out.
Okay, now, wait. You can't just drop that. You've been building a piece of a costume that is a facsimile for cosplay. It's
exactly.
A fake scythe.
It's a fake scythe.
We don't want the cops showing up at Comic-Con saying, "Oh my God, his daughter's there to wipe out part of the crowd."
No, yes, a 5 foot
sponge rubber
made out of PVC pipe and EVA foam. And I'm gonna paint it today. And
big lengths of PVC could be kind of dangerous, but whatever rocks your boat. Of course, you can always find me at pilebooks.com or at astromagazine.com because that's where I hang out. Please remember to drop us a line with a joke. Gosh darn it. At twist@twit.tv. That's TWIS at twist.tv. We welcome your comments, suggestions, and jokes. Come on, give us a break. New episodes of this podcast publish every Friday on your favorite podcatcher, so make sure to subscribe, tell your friends, and give us reviews, and just send us the love. Don't forget, you can get all the great programming with video streams on the Twit network ad-free on Club Twit, including some background stuff that you're not going to see anywhere else. And with me in the driver's seat, you can just imagine how engaging that might be for just $7 a month. You've heard Leo talk about the tough times facing podcasters, and it's true. It is hard out there. I know some people that are trying to start new ones in this general sector of conversation, and I wish them a lot of luck because it's a bear. So help us out. Join Club Twit, $7 a month. You won't miss it. And it'll make a big difference here. You can also follow the Twit Tech Podcast Network at Twit on Twitter and on Facebook, and at twit.tv on Instagram. Until next week, Tarek, John, Anthony, gang, it's been a howl. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us.